What we've got to do as the United Kingdom is to make sure that we're constantly ready to change the way in which we deal with partners and challenges around the world. And that's exactly what this integrated review does. And that's why the AUKUS deal is so important. So I have to say, I'm less worried about the headline languages. I'm much more interested in the response. And San Diego proves to me what I've always known, which is that we will take our responsibilities internationally seriously, and we will prepare for the future. And that's exactly what we've done with Prime Minister Albanese and, of course, with President Joe Biden.
So Times Radio Breakfast, the most significant security partnership for generations. That's how the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak described the agreement announced along with President Joe Biden and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. They confirmed that the UK is set to double its nuclear submarine fleet with a new generation of subs developed in cooperation with US and Australia. Yesterday, the PM outlined his strategic defence review, which cast China as representing an epoch-defining challenge to the world order, but not as a threat, a description which some Tory backbenchers had been pushing for. We can speak this morning to the Security Minister, Tom Tugendhat. Good morning to you.
Morning, Stig. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Now, Tom, you used to be a real China hawk, and so did your boss. I remember when he wanted to be leader, Rishi Sunak said that China was a systemic threat. I wonder now he realises how hard it all is when you're in the big chair. China is just an epoch-defining challenge. Have you personally, has your boss, has the government gone soft on China?
No, Stig, absolutely not. What we've seen here is that the Prime Minister is aligning himself quite rightly with our two partners that he's been with in San Diego, the Australians and the Americans. Now, nobody is going to tell me that China isn't a threat in some areas and a challenge in others. What the Prime Minister is doing is talking about that overarching picture, because China isn't just a single aspect or a single area. What we've got to do as the United Kingdom is to make sure that we're constantly ready to change the way in which we deal with partners and challenges around the world. And that's exactly what this integrated review does. And that's why the AUKUS deal is so important. So I have to say, I'm less worried about the headline languages. I'm much more interested in the response. And San Diego proves to me what I've always known, which is that we will take our responsibilities internationally seriously, and we will prepare for the future. And that's exactly what we've done with Prime Minister Albanese and, of course, with President Joe Biden.
So you're happy to say that in some respects China is a threat. That's not a line in the sand that you want us to not step beyond.
Look, if you want to get all Jesuitical about it, we can have that argument. But the reality is, China is many different things, and to define it as an epoch-defining challenge, I think, is a pretty way of doing a sort of all-encompassing, headline line. I mean, the reality is that there are some areas where it's a threat, some areas where it's a challenge, and some areas where it's a partner. Yeah. And the reality is, we've got to look at the government in Beijing with our eyes wide open, and not with, the hope that some people approached a number of decades ago, and to think really hard about what is in our interest, what's in the interest of the British people, and how do we defend our friends and our allies and ourselves against what is becoming an increasingly challenging world. This isn't just about China as well. You don't need me to tell you about the threats that we're seeing in Eastern Europe. You don't need me to tell you about the partnership we're seeing between President Xi and President Putin. You don't need me to tell you that all of these areas are challenging us in new and different ways. And that's why this alliance with Australia and with the United States is so important. It's about much more than nuclear boats. It's about standing together and defending those principles which have kept us free and open for 70, 80 years.
And you make a very clear case for the level of danger, the level of threat that exists around the world. And that's why you're doing this defence deal. But should we not be honest with ourselves here, Tom Tugendhat? If you were serious about defence, you'd be spending more money on it, more than the extra $5 billion over the next couple of years. The Defence Secretary clearly doesn't think that's enough. Military experts don't think it's enough. We had Lord Dannatt on this programme yesterday saying it's a third of what was needed. If the threat is so high, if defence is so important, should you not be spending more money on it?
Stig, look, I'm a former army officer. You're never going to hear me arguing for less money spent on defence. Okay, that's just not an argument I'm ever going to make. But the reality is, defence, as I know only too well, isn't just about nuclear boats or tanks or planes. It's also about the way in which we're able to operate. And if you look at what two Yorks have been doing recently with drone technology, what you're looking at there is the integration of technology, some of which was designed for civilian use into the military, and you're looking at the ways in which we're integrating intelligence into our military operations. That's changing the way that the military works. That's changing the way our armed forces work.
But you still need soldiers, you still need tanks, you still need ammunition. That's the point, though, still, Tom.
Of course you do. Of course you do. You still need personnel, and the United Kingdom is still lucky enough to have some of the most talented people in our country join our armed forces in the Navy, in the Army, in the Air Force. You see the most extraordinary people who step forward to serve. And in fact, as I saw in Tracy Crouch's constituency only yesterday at the Royal British Legion's Industry, people who as veterans not only serve once, but serve time and time again. So this is an extraordinary group of people that we are lucky enough to have serving us. And you're absolutely right, we do need more of them. And that's exactly what this government is investing in, by making our people more capable in new and different ways. And that is a fantastic gift to not just ourselves, but actually to our friends and allies as well.
Rishi Sunak's talking about his child getting a mobile phone, and China obviously is a technological competitor, threat, challenge, whichever word we want to choose to do.
All three, Stig, all three.
So as it's all three, where do we stand on something like TikTok, which is where often all three of those things come together? Would you two questions really. Personally, would you recommend people not being on TikTok? And with your professional hat on, would you ever come close to banning it? Trump wanted to ban it. Rishi Sunak has said he doesn't not want to ban it. Is banning it an option, do you feel?
Well, look, I don't have it, and the Prime Minister asked me to lead the Defending Democracy Task Force a little while ago, and as part of that, we're looking at the various threats to parliamentarians, but also to people like you, Stig, to journalists, the ways in which we undermine our democracy here. Our democracy could be undermined in the UK is not just by attacking elected officials, but actually attacking those who inform our whole society, people like you. And so looking at the various different apps that people have on the phone and the implications for them is a hugely important question. And I've asked the National Cyber Security Centre to look into this. And, they're an extraordinarily brilliant organisation made up of some of the finest tech geeks, if you'll forgive the expression. And they are looking into this. I've asked them to look into it. And until they come back with an answer, I'm afraid I'm not going to give you one because they're the experts.
But that could go so far as considering the notion of banning TikTok. That's on the table.
Well, look, it'll be addressed at the challenges we face, at the threats we face. I'm not going to give you an answer until I know what the risks are. And so, what I'm very focused on is the reality that there are various different apps that people put on their phones that, most of us, me certainly, I'm far too attached to my phone, as my wife will tell you. I'm sure this is true of you too. My kids tell me the same. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that our phones are not spyware, but useful tools for us. And that's where we need to get to in this process. And that's what I've asked the National Cyber Security Centre to look at.
Just finally, before you go, let's turn to another big domestic issue, if we may. The new law on small boats was debated yesterday. Theresa May expressing concerns about its blanket dismissal of refugees. Are you comfortable, Tom Tugendhat, that there is a mechanism in place to enable, say, a young woman coming from Iran to flee persecution, this is the example that Theresa May gave in the House yesterday, would be able to get to the country with the system that operates? Is there a clear route you can tell us about in a few words that would enable that to happen so we can offer help to a person like that?
So, Stig, look, I've been looking at this from different angles in recent months and years, and the challenge that comes to me constantly is we're focused, understandably, I suppose, on the Channel link, on that stretch of water between France and Kent. But the reality is that's the end of a trade that exploits human beings across the world. We're seeing, quite literally, sadly, thousands of people being killed in the Sahara, in the Mediterranean. And you'll remember those horrific images of Aylan Kurdi, who was effectively murdered by traffickers in the way that he was abandoned in the water and washed up on a Turkish beach. It was absolutely, as a father, it was one of the most painful scenes I think I've ever seen in journalism. It was a truly horrific photograph. We've got to realize that this exploitation of some of the most vulnerable simply must stop. And we must, as a government, we simply have a responsibility to do everything that we can to stop this exploitation.
And that includes opening up lines from other countries so they can come in not via boats, surely.
Well, the UK has done that in many different ways. I don't know if you remember, but the Vulnerable Persons Refugee Scheme from Syria was hugely welcomed and supported in the UK. The way in which we brought in people from Ukraine has been hugely welcomed and supported. The way in which people have quite literally opened their homes in some cases to Afghan and Ukrainian refugees has been hugely inspiring. This isn't about refugees. This is about human trafficking and the absolutely vile trade in human beings that has been far too profitable for far too many, and that simply must end. It is costing not just thousands and thousands of pounds to completely innocent people who are moving across the world, but it's costing quite literally thousands of lives, and it must end.
Tom Tugendhat, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
That's Tom Tugendhat there, the Security Minister.
And Lucy Fisher, our chief political commentator, was listening to that. What did you make, Lucy, of what he had to say about China? You know what that noise means, don't you? That noise means that she's not there.
I wonder if that was Tom Tugendhat
no, but then he was on the phone. You see,
you're a canny woman, aren't you?
Well, never mind. It's just a noise of disappointment.
Yeah. He was basically trying to say that, he doesn't want to get involved with headlines. China is a threat, a challenge, and competition, an opportunity as well. I think Lucy might be back.